In those days, the crest was in service to Steward Captain Auxilia of the Drift. We of the crest know that any day may be our last. We are mercenaries. We fight and we die at the whim of fate. But every crest knows that when the Sleeper King comes, it is our right and our duty to resist him for as long as we can. Thus it has been since the early days of the company, when we marched under Kiest's banner. The Vidala continue to fight back. Their Felswords have been close to the crow's nest for the last several days, watching our movements. We have reinforced the nest, much to Everett's chagrin, but as long as our coin continues to fill his pockets, he won't complain too much. Iron Gull has the squads continuing to run operations to distract the Felswords, while we try to determine who is providing the Vidala with funding and support, and what their goals are. Lephalia spends most of her time studying the captured artifacts, and she has determined they are most likely relics of an old god, long forgotten. Wherever the Vidala found these relics, they are playing with powers that are better left at rest. Lephalia is not one to be perturbed by vile magics, but even she has lost some color after probing the potential of these artifacts. If even one of them fell into the wrong hands, the Sleeper King would have his hands full. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, Benn faces a dire threat to his life. Find out what happens on episode 12, Drift Away. Benn Weinstone stands against the wall of this small warehouse where he's been holding and attempting to interrogate Alphys, the business manager and shopkeeper of the Vidala family. He's standing there bracing himself against the wall as his hand is leaving bloody prints on the wall. He is grimacing as he looks at the three Felswords that are circling around, getting ready to attack him. As behind them, he can see Arid and Cleofa Vidala engaged in a tense, magical duel. Benn has made the choice to stay, to fight, to not run and abandon his fellow crest soldier, but he is bleeding from so many cuts and he is weak, and it is unclear if he is going to be able to fend off these three Felswords as they approach. But before that, we are going to ask the fate chart a question. This may be one of the most important questions of this season, and that is, this warehouse is close to the crow's nest, the base of operations for the crest, and Cleofa was enacting some pretty powerful magic in order to contact Alphys. After Cleofa and her Felswords showed up and burst through the door, Cleofa and Arid have been engaged in a magical duel that surely must be leaving some sort of magical residue in this area. So, here is the question for the fate chart. Does Lephalia, the Lieutenant of the Crest, Grand Sorceress of the Crest, does she sense this magical disturbance going on in the vicinity, and does she move to investigate? Because I think she would know the sort of flavor of Arid's magic, considering he is a mage under her command. So because of that, I think it's going to be very unlikely that she detects that this battle is going on. However, because our chaos factor is 8, that means we've actually got a decent chance of getting a yes answer here. So I think it's very unlikely that Lephalia is going to detect this magic going on, but if she does, it could save Benn and Arid from an untimely and terrible fate. So we're going to take our 2 d10s and we are going to roll them, and we're going to find out. 45, which is a yes. Yes, she does detect this magic going on. And we know Lephalia a little bit, at least. We know that she can't resist going to where the magic is being performed. And so she's going to rouse herself from her study of the captured artifacts. She is going to leave her little study in the crow's nest, and I think she's going to snap her fingers and gather quickly a small group of crest soldiers, and they are going to head out in the direction of this fight. Now, that being said, it's going to take them a moment to get there. Even if she detected this magic right at the beginning of this fight has not lasted very long. So Benn and Arid are still in a dangerous position, and Benn is going to try and hold off these 3 Felswords as they are coming in at him. So we are going to engage in combat once again, and we're going to hope that our dice luck has improved since last episode. So I've got my 2d6, and we're going to add +1 on Fierce. Benn is sitting at 5 harm, which means he's basically very close to death. He is very injured. He's barely able to stand, but he is going to try and fend off these 3 Felswords with the determination of a crest soldier. Let's find out if he is determined enough. 7 on the dice +1 is an 8. So on a hit, 7 to 9, choose one of the following. You attack with vigor, inflict +1 harm. You parry their blows, you take -1 harm. You battle aggressively, you inflict +2 harm, but take an additional +1 harm to yourself. Or you fight defensively. You inflict -1 harm, but take an additional -2 harm to yourself. He is going to fight defensively. So he is going to only deal out a harm, and it's not really enough to get through their armor, but he is able to fend them off as these 3 Felswords come in at him. His back is against the wall. He's holding his bleeding wounds, and with his short sword, he's parrying their blows and like kicking out at them and forcing them back enough that he is able to hold off. I think there is a crack in the air, and Cleopha's head like snaps around as she looks at the door behind her, and in the doorway stands Lephalia of the Crest. Her eyes are flashing. Her pale skin seems to almost give off this luminescent glow as she says, "Oh, what do we have here? A new player? A new piece on the board? I've sensed your magic before, I think. Oh yes, you are the one who's been playing with these artifacts. Oh, we are going to have so much fun, you and I. You have so many questions to answer." And they are going to join the battle as several crest soldiers stream into the room and rush over to help Benn out. I think Cleofa knows that she's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. So let's go over to our fate chart and let's ask, is she going to attempt to retreat? I think it is a sure thing. $63. Yes, she is. Okay, so she is going to attempt to break the combat with Arid and Lephalia. I think she basically abandons the Felswords. I don't think she cares about them in the least. And she is going to attempt to make her way through the wall. I think she just turns and like waves her hands and is going to attempt to blast out the wall. Now, here's the question. Even though Lephalia is a powerful sorceress and Arid himself is a good mage, I think Cleofa is also very powerful and she is determined and maybe tapped into some dark powers. So we know she's going to try to escape. Is she going to be able to escape from these two other sorcerers who are going to try and stop her from leaving this vicinity? I think it's very unlikely that she's going to be able to escape and overpower both of them and get away. But again, because our chaos rank is at 8, there's still a decent chance of getting a yes on this. So here we go. 54. Yes, she is able to escape. So I think what this looks like is her turning, blasting a hole in the wall, and then she throws down her hands as if she's like flicking water off of her hands, and suddenly this ring of smoke just starts to billow up around her and fills the warehouse. Lephalia calls out and tries to blast her before she is able to escape, but Cleofa is able to make her way through that opening that she created and escapes into the streets of Heartvale. I think with the presence of the Crest soldiers, Benn is not going to have to fight anymore. They are going to set upon these Felswords, and I think the Felswords pretty quickly realize that they're outmatched. And is it possible that they are going to surrender? I think it's 50-50. Once again, chaos rank is 8. 18 is a yes. Yes, they are going to surrender. So they throw down their weapons and raise their hands, and the Crest take these 3 Felswords into custody as Benn slumps down against the wall, blood running out of his wounds. Alphys also is still there because he did not have a chance to run after the Felswords got him out of the way, and he is now also surrounded by other Crest soldiers. Benn sees them taking Alphys into custody as his eyes grow heavy and he fades into unconsciousness. And that's going to be the end of our scene. Wow, that was unexpected to say the least. So Benn is very badly hurt and is going to have to go back to the crow's nest. And I don't think it's worth rolling out a scene for that, because with Lephalia present and the other Crest soldiers and the proximity to the crow's nest, there's going to be no issue with Benn being transported back to the crow's nest to receive treatment. So I think Benn, his vision starts to clarify and he's blinking awake as he is laying on a table in a back room. He doesn't know exactly where, although the look of it is certainly reminiscent of the crow's nest. And he looks around a little bit and he sees a man dressed in loose-fitting clothing with an apron over him. He is olive-skinned with curly hair that looks as though it's mostly turned to white at this point. And he is wiping his hands with a rag. And he reaches over and picks up a clay mug, which he takes a sip from as he looks at Benn. And he's going to say, "Don't try to move too quickly, my friend. You have suffered a great deal of harm." And Benn looks up at the surgeon of the crest, Escorfeza, and he says, "How long was I out?" "You were out for a few hours, my friend, but you are doing better already. I've given you a mild sedative for the pain, but it seems like you are already coming out of it. It is good to see that you are making a swift recovery. I would have hated to lose you on the table." "I appreciate that." "Of course, it is my pleasure." And he is going to take a sip from the cup and says, "Almost perfect." And then he goes back to a little table off to the side, and he is adding a little bit more water and a few more herbs. And then he brings it over and sets it down on the table where Benn is laying and says, "You will drink this, my friend. It will help you feel better and I think help you sleep as well." Benn looks at it and grimaces a little bit as he sits up enough, groaning as the wounds on his body, which are bandaged, and he can feel the poultices pressed against them. He reaches for the mug and slowly lifts it up and takes a sip, and the flavor is slightly bitter, but there's almost a hint of cinnamon and cardamom in it. And he takes a few sips and then lays back down. He says, "Is Arid all right?" "Oh yes, my friend, he is fine. Your friend is very resourceful. He was uninjured in his battle with the mage. Unlike you, of course." Benn nods a little bit and then grimaces again as there's just pain everywhere. He says, "Is Iron Gull around? I should make my report." No need, my friend. Just rest. You are going to need a lot of rest. Just sleep." And as the surgeon of the crest says these words, Benn feels whatever herbs there were in the tea starting to take hold, and he drifts back off to sleep. So I think with that, we're going to say that his mission is complete because Alphys has been captured by the rest of the crest. Benn didn't really succeed in his interrogation of Alphys, but he did not lose Alphys to the Vidala. And in addition, a member of the Vidala did appear, and Lephalia has gotten a taste of what her magic is like. And I think because of that, it's going to be a little bit easier to try and track them down. So all in all, a relatively successful mission. So we're going to go through the various advancement parts. And first of all, rolling a highlighted stat once per scene per stat. And I've been doing that as I've gone along. So I'll just note that I marked one mark for the fierce roll that we did at the beginning of this episode because fierce was one of Benn's highlighted stats for this mission. Then entanglements. Steal something valuable or important from someone powerful is the entanglement that Benn had. And I'm going to definitely take an advancement point for that because I think Alphys counts as someone or something important or valuable. Use an honor move once per session, or in this case, once per mission. And yes, we did use an honor move. Benn used that to call on the crest for magical assistance in the form of Arid. So we're going to go ahead and mark one of those. And then looking at the rest of them, none of the other specific moves that I've used have given any sort of advancement points. So we are sitting at 4 out of 5 on this track. We almost got another advancement. as far as honor goes, we gain honor when we advance faction interests, agenda, and standing. So definitely did that. Gain honor when you make a new connection. I think actually yes, because I think Benn choosing not to leave Arid in the fight and not to save himself essentially means that Arid is a little bit friendly towards Benn now. Not that he wasn't before, but just more so. Like they have built some trust through this shared experience. Demonstrate power and skill. While the interrogation of Alphys did not go super well, the actual abduction of Alphys went very well. So we're going to go ahead and mark an honor for that. Spread rumors, secrets, or info. I'm going to take an honor for that as well, because I feel like Benn has some information, including this rift that now appears to have gathered between Admiral Welfrin and the Vidala, as well as just the general knowledge that there is a Vidala sorceress who is going to be a problem in the future, but at least we know that that is the case. So Benn is now sitting at 4 honor, which is good because he needs all the honor he can get. I'm also going to use a couple of those advancements that I've accrued over this last mission or so, and I'm going to increase Benn's fierce from 1 to 2, and I'm going to increase his sly from 1 to 2 as well. So now he's sitting at a steady of 2, a fierce of 2, a wily of 1, a sly of 2, and an arcane of -1. That way, hopefully, next time he gets into a fight, he will be a little better prepared. So we are going to, before we move into our next mission, let's go ahead and do the patron move and see how Iron Gull is feeling about how Benn handled all of that. So I'll roll 2d6, add plus steady. 10 on the dice plus 2 is a 12. So on a 10 plus, your patron is happy with you. You may remove 1 disobedience if you have any. I have no disobedience, but I'm going to increase my barter by 1 because Benn gets paid for the work he does. And I think we have this moment where Benn is still convalescing and Iron Gull comes into the room. Benn tries to sit up and Iron Gull sort of waves his hand a little bit and then sits down and he says, "You got pretty beaten up there, kid. How you feeling?" Benn says, "I'm doing better, thank you, Sergeant. I am a little less sore than I was. I think I'll be getting up and moving around here shortly." "That's good to hear, kid. You and Arid handled yourselves well in the face of those Felswords and the mage. I shouldn't have sent you out to do that mission on your own. I should have given you more backup. If I had, we'd have a member of the Vidala family in our custody right now." Benn doesn't really say anything because he doesn't know what to say. It almost seems as though Sergeant Iron Gull is apologizing, but that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like something the sergeant would do. So Benn is just going to look away and say, "Hopefully we were able to still get some useful information out of Alphys." Iron Gull says, "Oh yes, he's talked a lot. That little display in the warehouse certainly made him rethink things. And to be fair, I've had a few other people working on him who are a little more persuasive in those things. I think in the future we'll keep you away from interrogation, but you did a good job getting hold of him. And once you're back up on your feet, we're going to have a lot of work to do. I will be better as soon as I can be, Sergeant." "I know you will, kid. Keep up the good work." And Iron Gull's going to get up and leave the room. So I think because Benn is sitting at 5 harm, I think he's going to be out of the action for a while. So I think we probably need to ask some questions of the fate chart and see how much goes on while he's convalescing. So I think the first question is, after that close call with Cleofa barely escaping from Lephalia and Arid. Are the Vidala going to go underground? Are they going to go even more underground than they are right now? Are they going to try and get out of this situation and get some distance? Or are they going to turn it up to 11 and really push the issue against the Crest and against the Drift? Because still, the Crest are in the employ of the Drift, and at this point, Auxilia is determined to at least find out why the Vidala were using her ships and her crews for their nefarious purposes. Does it seem likely that the Vidala are going to go underground? I think based on what we know of them, they have some broader plan here. I don't think it's likely that they're going to go underground. So we're going to say it is very unlikely that they're going to go underground and basically walk away from this fight. And I'm going to take down the chaos factor from 8 to 7. Things are still pretty chaotic in the city, but with the recapturing of Alphys and taking out a couple of the Felswords and fending off the attack by Cleofa, that does create a little bit of breathing room for the Crest. So I'm going to say it's very unlikely. Chaos rank of 7. Do they go underground? 43 is a yes. Yes, they go underground. So we see that hallway again, that passageway leading down a dirt floor stone corridor to the stone door. And again, there are boot falls on the ground echoing through this chamber as 2 figures make their way. The stone door is pushed open, and those figures enter the room. Unlike the last time we saw this room, there is no group of people in here. There is only the old woman sitting in a small chair off to the side, away from where that basin full of fire was located. It is empty right now. There is no fire, no heat in this room. There are a few candles burning that provide the only light. And the woman is huddled in the chair, wrapped in blankets. She is holding what looks like a crystal in her hands, which she is like turning over again and again in her fingers. As the 2 figures enter, she looks up and she says,
"You have returned? What news do you have?"
A male voice says, "Our news is ill, Mother. The Crest have beaten us at every turn. They maintained their hold of Alphys." At this point, he looks over at Cleofa, who is standing beside him, and she says, "They had mages far more powerful than I was equipped to handle. If I had had one of the artifacts with me, I could have turned them all into my thralls. But you did not have an artifact with you, and because of your failure, they have more information on us than is safe. Mother, we should leave the city at once."
"But we have arrangements
with those in power. They are no longer going to cover for us. It is becoming too dangerous in the city. Those crest soldiers seem to be everywhere, and they are getting closer and closer to this reliquary. If you do not leave now, Mother, I fear they will find you, and we will all be lost. The old woman looks over at the basin, and she says,
If I leave now, our great work will go undone.
Her son, Destrian Vidala, says, It will go undone for a time, yes, but we will return to the city, and we will complete what we started. I swear this to you, Mother, and I swear this before the old ones. We will finish what we started. But if we do not go now, we will have no chance to do what we must. There's silence in this small stone chamber for a time. And then the old woman, turning the crystal over in her hands, stops, and she clutches her wizened hand around the crystal and tucks it away. Slowly she stands and says,
Very well. Let us be away from this place, then. There is no reason for us to linger.
And she makes her way towards the stone archway where the door is held. Destrian and Cleopha fall into line behind her, and they shut that stone door behind them as they leave. In the crow's nest, it has been 2 weeks since the attack, since Benn was brought so close to the brink of death, closer than he has ever been in his time with the Navy and in his time with the Crest. He sits at a table with Arid, and they are drinking in silence as he is still moving around gingerly. He is watching as the door opens and a small group of figures enter. One of them, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a clean-shaven face, looks around and raises a hand, gesturing as if to indicate that he comes unarmed. They very clearly have Felsword emblems on their cloaks. Captain Netheridge stands from the table that he has taken as his desk in the far back of the common room of the crow's nest and approaches. Benn watches as the two men meet, speak for a few moments, and then exchange handshakes. The Felswords leave, and Netheridge, brow still furrowed, returns back to the ledgers and books that are piled on the table in the back of the crow's nest. Benn watches as the Felswords go and turns to Arid and says, "What do you suppose that was about?" Arid says, "I think, my friend, it means our troubles with them are no more. I have seen it many a time in my travels with Crest. We have done our job, and we have beaten our enemy. It doesn't always end in a fight, in a battle. Sometimes we just have to outlast them. I would wager that our captain and their commander have come to an arrangement, and we won't be fighting them anymore. It is a good day, Benn. This is the kind of day that we celebrate in the Crest. We won without having to shed our blood on the stones. Well, more than a little bit, I suppose. Benn chuckles a little and says, Of course, a little bloodshed is better than a great deal of bloodshed, but how can it be over like that? We haven't found the Vidala yet. We haven't defeated them. Almost as if in answer to his question, Benn sees Iron Gull talking to the captain, nodding, and then Iron Gull moves to the center of the crow's nest. He bangs on a table to get everyone's attention and says, All right, listen up. As of today, our conflict with the Felswords is at an end. They've just informed us, and we have verified through our other sources, that the Vidala family have fled Heartvale. Whatever they were planning, it doesn't seem to have been worth the cost of their lives and livelihood. We've heard from our allies in the Shade that the Vidala family holdings have been seized by the Council of 12, and the Vidala family are no longer welcome here in Heartvale. Now, we all know what that means, and there's a slight chuckling. Iron Gull says, As far as the city is concerned, this matter is closed, and we have no need to pursue it any longer. As long as Auxilia, the steward captain of the Drift, is satisfied, our contract will be concluded, and it'll be time for a new contract. There's some chuckling, and somebody calls out, Any ideas yet? Iron Gull shakes his head and says, There'll be time enough for that in the future. We have been approached by a number of different groups within the city about doing some work. As usual, the captain and lieutenant will take it all under advisement and make the best decision for the Crest. We don't often get to walk away from these sort of squabbles relatively unharmed. And I say relatively because we all know that we lost brothers and sisters in the last few months. But the Crest is strong. We are stronger than we've ever been. And we are ready for the next contract. And if for some reason those Vidala decide to return to Heartvale, well, we'll be here, and we'll be ready for them. And we'll teach them the same lesson they just learned. The Crest doesn't back down. The Crest doesn't lose. The Crest remains. And there's some cheers, and Iron Gull orders a round of drinks around to all of the tables, and then retreats back to talk with the captain and the lieutenant who has emerged. In the days that follow, the captain goes to the Drift and meets with Steward Captain Auxilia. While she is not satisfied with not knowing why the Vidala used her ships to bring in these strange magical artifacts, she is satisfied that they are no longer a threat to her or her people. And as such, her contract with the Crest comes to an end. The steward captain and Captain Netheridge part on amiable terms, and the captain returns back to the crow's nest. It's been another week, and Benn is able to get around a little bit easier. He is walking through the streets and makes his way to Merrick's brewery. And I think as he enters the brewery, Merrick sees him and goes, "Benn, my friend, come, sit here. Let me get you a drink. I just finished brewing something. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a nice ale with a little bit of coriander. It's quite lovely, I think." And he comes over with a couple of mugs and sets them on the table. Benn is still nursing his wounds a little bit as he sips this new, fresh ale from Merrick. And they spend their time reminiscing over those heady days as youths before they went off to their military service, before Merrick returned and started brewing. Merrick was a couple years ahead of Benn, but they are close enough in age that they certainly had plenty of time together during their childhood. As they're sitting there, Benn says, "Merrick, tell me more about what you hope to accomplish with this place. It is amazing. I knew you always had an interest in brewing, but I did not know that you were going to open your own place." Merrick says, "Well, I thought about all the things I could do, and I really just wanted to brew. I had no idea when I got out of my service what I was going to do. I of course, had a small stipend from the family, you know how it goes, but I didn't want to lean on their name, on their influence in this. So I decided I would take what I had earned during my time in the Navy, and I would take that small stipend and I would put it into this place." And he looks around at the brewery, and it has turned into something that I am immensely proud of, Benn. I've built something here, something that there are many people in the city that want my beer, and not because of my family name, but because of me, because of my skill as a brewer. Do you know what I mean? Benn, sipping off of the mug in front of him, smiles a little bit and says, "I do know what you mean, my friend. You are indeed a skilled brewer. This is delicious." "Oh, that's not what I mean. You returned from your time in the service, and you joined this mercenary company, and I still don't understand why you would join a mercenary company, but I at least understand the urge to make something of yourself, to not go back to our families and lean on the good graces of high society." Benn says, "Yes, that is exactly it. When I returned from my time, I knew that I couldn't just go home and go back to the scriptorium, even though that is what I always intended to do. Merrick, when we were out there fighting Davenar, I know your service ended a few years ago, but the things that I saw out there, they didn't make sense based on how I was introduced to the world. I saw deprivation and hardship. I saw pain and death, and not just in our troops, but also in Davenar's. there were times where we would trade supplies with Davinaran ships when we were becalmed because there was nothing else to do to survive, and we all wanted to go home. There were times where we were at peace even during our war. And yet, the next day we were fighting and killing each other. So yes, when I returned home, I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I knew that I couldn't go back home. I couldn't just go to the scriptorium and become a student once again. I needed to be part of something that made sense. And that's when I heard about the Crest, and I had met them before. They fought with us. One of their Crest soldiers saved me, and I saw what they did. They fought harder than any of our troops. And they also brought food and supplies to villages that were cut off by the turmoil and the war. I'm not saying they're good, because they take jobs that sometimes require us to do horrible things. But I think they are invested in making a change in the world around them, in taking control of their own destiny and choosing a path. At least I hope that is what they are, because I've tied myself to them. Merrick nods and says, "Do you ever think about going home? Do you ever think about seeing your family again? I'm sure they miss you and would love to see you again." Benn says, "I don't know about that. When I left, it was not on the best of terms. My mother, you know how she can be. She wanted to use their money to get me out of my service, to send someone else in my place. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't let my responsibility go. I couldn't let someone else take my place. And having made that choice and gone out and seen the things I did, I don't know that that was the right choice. Or the best choice. But it was the choice I had to make. And I would do it again. But no, I don't plan to go home." And the two of them spend the rest of the evening drinking and reminiscing and spending time together at peace. Benn is called to the crow's nest the next day. When he arrives, he sees the red-haired shade Erdira sitting at a table. She looks up and smiles at him as he enters, and Iron Gull intercepts him as he starts to make his way over to her. Iron Gull says, "Ben, there you are. Good. How are you feeling?" "Much better, Sergeant." "Good. You seem like you're getting around well. I heard you took a trip over to your friend's brewery. Looks like that did you some good as well." "Yes, Sergeant, it did." "Excellent. I assume you know the young lady sitting at the table there?" Ben nods and says, "I do. Why is she here?" Iron Gull smiles and says, "Well, The crest is back to work. We have a new contract. In those days, the crest was in service to the shade. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you haven't already, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really does help others find me. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @ErrantSoloPod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.